Are you like way too close?
Step one, keep your arrow knocked on your string. Archery Trick Shots Volume 1. Behind the back. Woo! So, in all seriousness, we're gonna go over a couple mistakes that I see a lot of archers making, whether you're newer to bow hunting or archery, or you've been doing it forever. I see a couple things stick around with people. Some bad habits that I've had to overcome and put some serious effort into. I hope my release is down here. It is. That's exciting. So to this day, I think I've seen a lot of videos on this specific topic, which makes me happy to see, but I still see a lot of people drawing their bows improperly. And I say improperly.
All right, let's go ahead and draw it back. It's pretty smooth.
Some people might argue that it's a preference thing, but it really isn't. There is a better and a worse way to draw your bow. So number one mistake that I see is drawing with a low shoulder. Whether you're using a wrist sling trigger release or any kind of handheld, whether it's a button, a hinge, a back tension release. If you draw with a low shoulder, let me show you what I mean. This is gonna feel horrible. Make sure I'm warmed up for this. Could just use your bow, that's smart. So this is what an improper draw looks like with a low shoulder. You draw down like this and then come up into your anchor for your shot. There's a couple reasons that a low shoulder draw is not ideal. One, if you talk to physical therapists or physios, they'll tell you that this is more injury prone for your shoulder. But from an archery perspective, what I actually have a problem with is after you get to full draw, you then have a second step of turning your hand and getting into your anchor. You have to come from here, putting your shoulder up to where you're actually in a firing position. So instead of a low shoulder draw, you don't have to sky draw the bow by aiming it super high up. You can still point it right at the target, but I want to see an elbow above the shoulder. And that does a couple things.
Hey.
What a proper draw is going to give you is actually activating your lats and your scapula and your back. So that way you're steadier at full draw and you'll be less injury prone. But a lot of people have been drawing with a low shoulder for years without any injuries. So this is why I think a low shoulder draw puts you at a disadvantage when it comes to archery. When you have to draw like this and get up into your anchor, you're adding a second or two to your draw before you're starting your aiming process. Whereas if you're using a handheld or a trigger release, if you point at the target, draw with your high shoulder, I'm anchored. There is no second step to come from here to here and start my shot process. As I draw, settle into your anchor, and you're there. So number one archery mistake I see is drawing with that low shoulder. Work on getting to a draw where your elbow is over your shoulder, so that way you're more injury resistant, but also you can get your shot execution happening faster. The longer that you're at full draw, the less steady and the less accurate you can be with your aiming. These arrows should really go over here. Think I can make it in there, in the jar? That's pretty close. All right, so right along those same lines as mistake number one, once you get to your full draw with a proper draw technique, what I want to see is your head already being in position and you bringing the string to your face. Let me show you what I mean. What I see all too often is guys will draw their bow, get to their back wall, and start fishing their face around to find their anchor. And there it is. Then they lock in and start their shot process. surprise release. The problem you have with that is the same as an improper draw. We need to simplify and speed up the things that are keeping us from starting our aiming and shot execution process. So what I want you to practice, you can do this with your eyes closed, is have your head in the shooting position at draw. And what needs to happen is when your bow comes back, the string comes to your face for perfect execution. I mean, geez. Let's just compare the draw times between those two. Use these giant arrows in this little bow. I'll use Emmy's bow here just for demonstration. It'll be easier on my shoulder. So, I'll do a low draw. Get up into the anchor, fish my head around. Start the shot execution. Okay, I'm trying to be fair. Obviously I could just punch a shot off. I'm trying not to do that. Let's do a real shot process here. So you've got that versus high shoulder, string to the face. You can just start aiming so much sooner. Low draw shoulder, string to the face. Push my head around. Every half second, you don't need to be holding your bow up steady, the more accurate that you can be, especially shooting at distance. So again, mistake number 2 is not having your head set and fishing for the string at full draw. For prime consistency and speed to shot execution, what I want to see is heads already in position at full draw. I personally get my pin on the target and then bring the string to my face. That one was a huge tip for me. So this is a little bonus tip for you guys. But once you draw, get your pins on the target and then anchor. Again, instead of coming to your anchor and then trying to find the target while you're in your anchor, draw, pins on, anchor. That was night and day for me. If you take 2 seconds off of your pre-shot process, it's gonna make accurate shots so much easier. Number 3, and arguably the most important and the most common archery mistake, is bad shot execution. And that all has to do with your actual manipulation of your release. So first, I'll show you what poor shot execution looks like with a wrist sling trigger release here. The old Cam Hanes special. Fantastic release. Definitely the one I recommend if you're gonna shoot a trigger. Let's say you're shooting and you practice all the same fundamentals that I just talked about, getting to your shot quickly. But then, when it comes time to execute that shot, come get a close up of my hand here. When it comes time to execute that shot, what I see too often is guys will have their finger right here. You see what I did there? The huge problem that people have is what's called shot anticipation. If you want to learn more about this, you can look up Joel Turner shot IQ. Just throw that in your search bar on YouTube. But the problem is when you have time from here to getting that trigger to actually go off, this movement here, that's time for your pin to wander off target. That's time for you to react to the shot, meaning like watch my bow arm here. As I go to punch that trigger, I'm anticipating the bow going off, and I do something with my bow arm, whether it's up into the target, whether it's down into the target. I'm anticipating that shot, and naturally, punching the trigger is throwing off my point of impact. Instead of having any kind of space between the trigger and your finger here, take up all of the extra room possible. So you should be touching the trigger and preloading it and loading it so slowly that the release goes off as a surprise. And that surprise shot is going to make sure that you're not putting any of this into the bow as it goes off. The number 1 problem in archery is target panic. And especially for you beginner archers, if you can practice perfect shot execution early, you're gonna be setting yourself up for success. For proper shot execution, I want you to hook your finger around the trigger, engage it, and pull with your back. Like your elbow should be moving away from the bow, this back elbow. You need to be building tension in the front of the bow and in the back of the bow. You want that pressure to be built up to where when that bow goes off with a surprise release, you fall out of the shot with your push and your pull. Bow goes forward, release hand goes backwards. So handhelds, same freaking thing. A lot of people go to a handheld release hoping to stop punching the trigger, and they still do it. I see this all the time. A telltale sign, if you're punching a handheld release and not using proper back pressure, is when you shoot this release. So look at my thumb. See how my hand is still right here? Like I punch this and my hand stays right by my face. That shows me I'm not using my back muscles to put pressure into this release for stability and execute that surprise release. Let me show you the difference. Proper shot execution. Watch the release hand. When that shot goes off, all that pressure comes out of that backhand versus me using the button. It's night and day difference. Take a video of yourself. If you see release not leaving your face, you're not using enough back pressure. And I will do a full video breaking down how to defeat your target panic, how to execute a proper release. But I just want to raise a couple red flags. If you're doing these things, try to correct them and see how much it improves your archery. I already can feel there's probably going to be some guys in the comments who say, well, I punch the trigger and I shoot just fine. Not everyone wants to be a surprise shooter, and there is some fantastic command shooters, people who decide they want their bow to go off with a trigger or a handheld release. The two greatest examples currently is Kyle Douglas. He shoots a handheld. He shoots a button release like this. So he finds the target and then tells that release to go off. Cameron Haynes, with his trigger release, decides that bow is gonna go off. The right people with a very, very calm mind can shoot their bow on command very successfully, but 99% of us, myself included, cannot. Our minds freak out when we're trying to make that bow go off without moving the front hand. At the very least, if you're gonna shoot your bow with command, before you press this trigger down, don't have a space between the trigger and your thumb. Take up all of the slack, put some pressure in, and then you can punch it. I'm hesitant to even say that. Please at least do that. But it's a freaking really cold day outside. What is it, like negative freaking 3 or something feels like? Like negative 3 feels like outside. Still hoping to get a turkey kill. Just to recap, the 3 things. 1 is gonna be low shoulder draw. Don't draw your bow underhand and then come up to your anchor. Let's get a nice elbow over shoulder draw to a still face. We're not gonna draw and then fish to find our anchor. We're gonna draw, bring the string up to our face. That's gonna give you the maximum consistency and speed to your shot execution. Number 3 is that actual release manipulation. So once you get into your anchor, pins on the target, let it float. You're gonna take up all the pressure you release, and ideally you're gonna push with your front hand, pull with your back hand, slowly, slowly, slowly. Boom, that shot breaks. You guys are gonna ignore me. But I hope this video is helpful for some of you guys, whether you are newer to archery or bow hunting, or you've been doing this forever and just need a little bit of tune-up on the actual archery side. I encourage you guys to research it, but more importantly, put it into practice. Shoot your bow often. Don't take this time in the winter like we all do and slack off on archery. At the very least, come in here to the basement just like I did and shoot your bow at 3 feet, working on that proper shot execution. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. Leave it a like if anything in here was helpful or you enjoyed it anyways. Comment below what you want to see next, and may God bless you all.